Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products.
Recorded Wednesday, April 6th, 3:15 p.m. Mountain Time. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Brody, I'm fine. This is Rod, by the way.
Hi, Rod, by the way.
Yeah, since you didn't introduce me. And Frank's here as well. I'm doing pretty good. Just thinking for a second about what has transpired so far. It's been a busy week. Delivered, I have, this is actually pretty cool. So the Must Learn KQL series, obviously, as you can imagine, that those three letters come out of my mouth like every day since I started that series last year. Wasn't intended, but delivered the beta version of a Must Learn KQL workshop yesterday evening to new hires at Microsoft, trying to create a full workshop for KQL for our customers, for the internal folks, but also for our partners to deliver. I realized that even covering only 50% of that Must Learn KQL series, I was well over the 3 hours that they gave me yesterday, and I had to cut it short. So it might end up being a couple day workshop. So we'll see how that works out.
Fair. That was a big topic, right? That's fair.
Yeah.
Don't want to rush it. Nice.
How about yourself, Brody?
Well, also a busy day. Last week I was out on site with a customer, and it was very nice to be out in front of people again, although slightly intimidating when you haven't presented in front of a customer in a few years. And this is an important customer, and we've been talking for a while now. And so just putting faces to names and having that actual human connection was very nice. Yeah. You had no idea. You almost forget what it was like before everything was on Teams or virtual when it comes to delivering projects or working on things. And it was just like an eye opener. Everything, just all the little nuances, watching body language, people who are multitasking and not really paying attention, and then the people who are actively listening with the ultra nodding like I do, and just the way you manage people in the room and manage people on the customer side who, there's different personalities and how they interact with each other, and then how you're there. It's just, the whole thing was interesting to be back into, and the topic was important. Everything related to information security with this financial services institution, and most importantly, we got to take them out to dinner and let them know how much we appreciated them, and we all have a better connection now moving forward. So when we get on these calls now, back this week, back home and home base, you're at a deeper level of understanding and connection than you were before, and I think that goes a long way when it comes to solid customer service and obsession that we try to do here.
Yeah,
I hope you aren't wearing that same orange shirt that you were wearing now at the meeting.
This is my go home on the plane shirt. I had
it's your Shaggy. It's your Shaggy. If you ever watch old cartoons.
Yes.
Everybody wore the same clothes every episode, like the entire, your entire Mystery Inc., the entire Scooby-Doo gang. That's your Shaggy, man. You need to wear that all the time. You're like Mark Zuckerberg now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's very comfortable. Thank you for the compliments. Yeah, I think your t-shirt. Oh, I got my Atomic Red Team shirt. Where is that? It's in my other room. So I just got that the other day.
It's probably wrinkled, so you don't want to.
Well, I mean, it came out of the box, so it's folded, but not wrinkled. Yeah.
I have to be honest, though. I there was a time a couple years ago, right before COVID, that I never thought I would miss that human. I thought I would never miss that human interaction again. But you're absolutely right, Brody. There's something about being in person, face to face with folks, being able to see their expressions and reaction and responses to conversations and stuff. It's just, wow. It's something humans need. I mean, I know we talk about it from a Microsoft / customer business perspective, how important that connection is, but I mean, just in general, right? That human perspective. So when we talk about from a security areas and these hackers and nefarious folks that sit around, in their basements smoking cigarettes and hacking people's business, financial accounts. They literally just need a hug. They need to go. They need friends. They need to go interact with people. They won't be so crazy and nefarious. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I've just solved all the world's problems. And there you go.
Well, then the second you develop a little bit of people skills, maybe you can apply for an information security role and help defend against those basement dwelling, cigarette smoking, nefarious actors.
Yeah, it's just an outreach program. Really, it's all it is.
Outreach,
Security is an outreach program. Yeah.
Oh yeah, good.
How about you, Frank? Frank, how are you? How's your week been?
Been updating SC200 courseware. That's basically been my week. So.
Speaking of which, you know it comes out tomorrow. Tomorrow's the 7th, right? Yep. Tomorrow's the 7th. Yep.
SC100. That's so cool. How long is it in beta for? How long do we have to challenge it?
You know, I think I heard that date, but I've absolutely forgotten it. Frank, do you know by any chance? How long do these normally stay in beta?
If I knew, I would not be able to tell you under NDA. So.
Okay. All right. So
just whisper it into the mic.
Yeah. Let us know on the side, Frank. Thanks. Yeah. Well, that's exciting. We've been talking about it for a while now. That's going to be really interesting. But the downside of writing beta is you never get the score.
It's true, I guess. But I tell you what, I'm signing up for it tomorrow. I'm going to take it as soon as absolutely possible.
Have you studied at all, or are you just going to wing it?
I never study on the first test, and I've surprised myself a bunch of times. So.
Yeah. As a mentor told me, now that we don't have to expense them, especially because they're included with Microsoft. But I can understand how some of our listeners, this is not an option and you do need to pay for this, but you can use the first go at the test as your study guide and your baseline and find out where you're weak in, where you're strong in, because when you get the report and even those feelings you got when you got those specific questions in areas where you were like, oh, darn, I don't know, that's a great way to then not have to do the entire courseware study and actually focus on those areas that you're weaker in and be a bit more efficient if you have the resources to do that in whatever capacity. So I hear you, Rod.
Yep.
I'd like to remind Brody and Edward on May 11th, I believe that it is your AZ 104 results show. So
I don't want to do it. I don't want to. It's going to be nice out. There's only so much summer we get here in Calgary. Okay, I want to just go outside and garden and bike ride. I don't want to study for that one. I will do it.
I think was surprising.
I think you might be able to take Edward on this one. So
yeah. And it's the funny thing is I had written it. It was the 102 when I took it, and then they said, oh, you don't need to do the 103 anymore. No, it was the 101 and 102, and then they combined them, and then they gave everybody a pass, so you didn't have to write the second one. But then it expired over the fall last year when I was just tanked. I had 8 customers, and I was barely sleeping, and I'm like, I just can't. And now I'm wishing I did, so I could not be a part of this.
Do your 305, then your Azure Architect.
The AZ 500 is the next one. I really want to tackle the core security ones, and
that's what I did.
Yeah, and there's only so much time. And then I'd like to actually take my CCSP this fall, winter, so vendor neutral, and so I might be more tactical. I'm not probably going to get more into heavy duty Microsoft certifications outside of what's coming up here with the 100, the 500, and unfortunately the 104. I'd like to kind of start to branch out a little bit more, take some other items. Although I've heard there's been a lot of negative. This is just my opinion, everybody listening. I hear there's been a lot of negative feedback on things like the certified ethical hacker recently. Frank, have you heard about those entry-level offensive certs? It's different from the ones that you're working on, the more specific, the name of the organization is escaping me right now.
Offensive security. So
yes.
So here's the deal: is that there's certifications that will get you in the door, and then there's certifications where you'll really learn from. Right. So those are two different things. So being in the DC area, the government has specific certifications that, meet certain requirements, right, for different roles. So certified ethical hacker, I believe, is one of the certs that does get you in the door in certain roles, in information security for the government. So one of the reasons why I took the GCFA the GIAC GCFA is because it's one of those certs that do that. So if I like, but if you have your CISSP, then it doesn't really matter at that point in time to take the CEH from a getting yourself in the door standpoint, I should say. Right. So you have to look at the role, what's going to be best for you to get in the door and so on, and move forward. I have no desire to do the CEH at all, having my OSCP. I don't see a need to do that. And I don't know where they're at with the certification, but it is a door opener for a lot of people.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the opinion on that. That's good. That's good info. Nice.
Yeah, I'm except for my renewals, I think from a certification standpoint, SC100 absolutely, because that with SC200 and the other ones, any of the other ones you want to take, it gives you that analyst expert. Is that what it's called, or something like that? Anyway,
something like that.
Oh, yeah, always like the expert tag.
Yeah, you'll get the experts on the cybersecurity.
Yeah. So I've done that for the M365 stuff, the administrator stuff, the security stuff, the
even 24, Rod.
Even the DevOps stuff, which that one actually surprised me.
I want to let you know that I have the most important Microsoft certification for security people. I am a Power Platform architect expert. So there you go.
So
we bow down.
I'm going to tell you, this is. I have, for whatever reason in my career, I've always had this ability to figure out what is the next big thing that is going to be, something folks should learn, or something, whether it's KQL or Sentinel or, I don't know, a long time ago is, other things. Power Platform, I believe, absolutely, is going to be that next big thing. So that's a pretty good certification, I think.
Yeah, good call out. I've had a customer already ask about how they can label and classify their Power Platform instances in alignment to the rest of their data protection strategy. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I got to go learn that, because I haven't looked. Actually, it's pretty straightforward. But
I had a discussion. Well, not a discussion. I call all my interactions and engagements, they're discussions. But this was over Twitter, so it was like in 180 characters less. But I was talking about the Power Platform and how we could integrate that with Sentinel, or how we might be able to use that for potential as a security tool. And someone's like, "No, that's a productivity tool or something, only for on-prem." Blah 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 blah. I'm like, no, I don't think so. So it has a lot of.
Got no huge Twitter argument, and everybody saw it, or what?
Well, some people agreed with me.
Well, first of all, Power Platform covers many different products, right?
It does.
So you have to take a look at. I mean, even when you start talking about using Power BI to create dashboards that you're using, coming from the security products, then you're actually still in the Power Platform area. So I can give you an entire thing about Power Platform, but I started out with Dynamics in 2003, I forget the year now, or something like that. So, I go back, which was if you really look at it, was really the first. They stole a part of Dynamics and relabeled it part of the Power Platform. So it was the original Power Platform products. I always make fun of the Power Platform and call it Power Builder, but I won't continue down this path. But if anybody wants to have that conversation, I will definitely have that with them. But here's the deal: is that just to finish it, there's nothing wrong with the technology. The technology's great. The problem that I've had with it is the licensing. So understand the licensing before you get involved with it, and see where they're at with the licensing at that time. So if they could ever finalize that and make that understandable, then I think, the corporations, the enterprises I've dealt with, they will actually be much more willing to move forward with it. So that's the only. Nothing wrong with the technology, just watch the licensing.
So what you're saying is we just need to do what we've done kind of more recently with everything, make a free tier and a P1, P2, and then that'll literally solve all the licensing issues.
So Power Platform and Dynamics kind of go hand in hand from a licensing standpoint. A few years ago, I had to go to a customer and said, "You remember that quote that I gave you last year on the Dynamics side for $700 a month?" They're like, yeah. I'm like, Microsoft's proposing new pricing, so It's now going to be $400,000 a month, right? So, then, a few months later, I came back and said, good news, Microsoft's, people are screaming about the pricing. So now it's only going to be $200,000 a month, right? So the thing is that, I moved away from it primarily because of the price, because of them not getting the pricing right. And so I'm not saying this because Microsoft was trying to be greedy about it. They were trying to change a fixed licensing model to a consumption-based.
Yeah.
And sometimes it worked out well for customers, and sometimes it worked out against the customers, right? But their entire goal was to focus on consumption-based.
Right.
And they did not do a good job at communicating that to customers. So not only did they just had a huge communication problem in explaining that to customers, because I heard customers complaining about things in Dynamics and Power Platform that would end up costing them less, but they didn't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a huge communication problem, and then they weren't getting the pricing stabilized. And I heard somebody complaining the other day about Power Automate with a service account and the pricing involved with that. So I'm like, I'm glad I'm not dealing with that anymore. Sentinel pricing is much easier.
Yeah, licensing, pricing, try to avoid it. Not gonna lie, at all times. We've got specialists for that. Go ahead.
So we have two things tonight. One is show and tell by Rod of some upcoming features, and then we have to do some homework for Brody. So we'll start with Rod. You are the host.
All right, let me share my screen. It is the entire screen on that one. Okay. Trying to go between Zoom and Teams. Actually, I hate to say this, but Zoom makes it easier for sharing screens.
It's a little faster too, but you didn't hear that from me.
Yeah. Well, one of these days we'll focus on performance versus features, hopefully. So,
I love the GIFs though; they're great.
Yeah. So, a couple things that we have that in Microsoft Sentinel that will be delivered here shortly, and we'll make some announcements around. But I just wanted to kind of highlight this for those that haven't seen these yet. First off, I'm going to start with the Defender Data Connector. So for the longest time, we've had this Microsoft Data Connector, Microsoft Defender Data Connector, and my screen is kind of frozen. Let me stop sharing and share it again.
So is the M365 Defender connector that you could only link up? You could only send the raw events from MBE. Is that which one you're talking about?
Yeah. So if we go to, in fact, it's kind of neat because now MCAS actually, or should I say MCAS? Now Defender for Cloud Apps actually works, where it hasn't actually worked for a while and hasn't worked for a little while for a lot of customers. So if we go into the...
Yeah, in the SC200 course where I'm basically saying the other connectors, MBE, all that stuff are legacy connectors and pushing it off to the side.
So they are legacy connectors, but they're still, right now, they're still shared code, so they're still needed. You can actually turn those off, and when you enable it in this connector, it's going to turn those back on. A lot of customers are like doing a double take, like, wow, I just turned that thing off. But as you can see down here, so I now have all of them connected, right? Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Identity, and the alert evidence stuff, which isn't quite there yet. Customer asked today, hey, the preview tag is off. Does this mean if you look down here, they didn't actually look up here, right? So the preview tags have been taken off the actual connections down here, but it's still part of that data connector. So it is still in preview, but just to let you know that these are starting to show up, which is actually good news. That's probably...
So the raw events are going across now. Let me ask you, the question is, you said that the old connectors are still there, which is great, and it would send across the alert without the raw data, but you could not do the bi-directional incident updating. Is that only available in the M365 Defender connector, not the old connector?
So this is so the old connectors did not provide that two-way, that bidirectional sync. This connector is the connector that does that, right? I'm not positive whether or not the enablement of those other connections.
No, because they would actually want you to do the incident creation rule to actually create the incident, which then doubled your work. So that's why I'm like, don't use it.
Yeah. One cool thing I noticed about that today, because it is part of Cloud App Events, in the past, we tried to figure out who's been doing things within the Sentinel console, like who wrote an analytics rule, who created a workbook, who did this, who did that. You'd have to go through Azure Activity Log to be able to do that. One thing I noticed today, because Cloud App Events has been created from Defender for Cloud Apps, you have all that goodness actually in here. So I was creating, guess what? I was creating workbooks this morning for a couple customers, and sure enough, it's all in here. Not only my name, but the IP address I did it from, my ISP that I connected from, right? Charter Communications, my city, country code, everything is listed there. And I was creating workbooks within Microsoft Sentinel. So there's a lot of really, really good information in here that's going to be provided for customers to be able to kind of do a watch the watchers type of situation as well. So,
good to know your IP address too, Rod. That's great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, that's my ISP's IP address, not mine. The other thing I wanted to kind of show too as well, let me make sure that I named it correctly. Oh, what did I name it? There's a new workbook, and I just put it in here this afternoon. Now there it is. Archive logs.
I was going to say, is it called Rodcasts?
Is this it? This is not it. So there's a brand new workbook that's going to be pushed to the Microsoft Sentinel workspace within the next week or so, and all of those basic logs stuff, basic logs, archives. Let's see, what did I name it?
So let's talk about archive logs.
Okay.
Archived logs. So go ahead and finish this, and we'll take a look at something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not even sure this is it. I think I named it something else. I loaded it. It's going to be pushed to Microsoft Sentinel workspace within the next couple weeks. You can go out to the GitHub repository and grab it now if you want to do it. What it does is it looks through your log analytics workspace and tells you which tables are set for basic logs, which have the archive bit, which are analytics logs and things like that, and help with pricing and all that stuff. A lot of customers are interested in those new options. I think next week, or is it the week after, we have a webinar actually on those new archive options and stuff like that.
So under search, if you click on search on the left menu.
Yeah.
Go down. No, keep going down.
Keep going down. Here?
To the left. Keep going left. Under news and guides.
Oh, okay.
No, under news and guides.
Oh, that search. Oh my goodness. Holy crap. What, do you want me to search for something?
Yeah, there's search.
So we should name
it. This is like doing tech support for the family here. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So go and search and click search, and then look at your saved searches. Yeah.
All right, so
I can't turn my caps lock off.
I don't see any key.
So let's talk about restoration here. So, or archiving in general. So basically, a basic log and an analytics log can all be archived, or is it only basic logs?
No, basic logs and analytics logs at the extent of that retention period. So basic log, it's 8 days max. Okay. And then analytics logs, 90 days for free, but you can go up to 2 years. But at the end of that retention period, you can set that archive bit, and they will automatically get archived if you want them to. And you can do that per table.
Okay, so when you're searching in here and you're doing the restoration, this isn't only on the basic logs, it's also across the analytics logs?
All archived logs. So anything that you have archived set to cold storage, right? So now we have active storage, which is that retention period. We have warm storage, which is ADX, right? Because you can still query, you can't use it for analytics roles, but you can still query that warm data. Then we have cold storage, which is archive. And this is the stuff that gets actually archived, and it's inaccessible until you restore it.
Okay.
Okay. Good to know.
All right, what else are you going to show us?
Well, it's just those and that workbook. I feel so silly that I can't remember what I actually called it. I just loaded it here earlier just to show it, but it's actually some good stuff. I know a lot of customers will be interested in it.
You'll find it.
I will. But
Well, why don't you stay screen sharing, and let's do Brody's work for him, and
I reached out for help to colleagues, which I'm sure you've never done before.
let's see. I have to write a response to this RFP. Can you please fill everything out for me? That's what he sent over.
This is nowhere near filling out everything in an RFP, but yeah. But
all right.
yeah.
So what was your question, Brody?
Okay. So Rod just found it. Do you want to keep going, Rod?
Well, yeah, we can go ahead. You can talk while this is coming up.
Okay. So I am working with a customer who currently has Splunk as their primary SIM.
Yeah.
And they want to ensure that they're effectively grabbing all available logs from M365 security compliance services, et cetera. The specific question was around ingesting logs that come from Defender for Cloud Apps. And it was, what are the pros and cons of the generic SIM integration? So the way I'm hearing that is going into the Defender for Cloud Apps console and actually setting up that direct SIM integration with the forwarder, or to use the Graph API. I believe when they say that, it's using the Graph API module or add-on provided by Splunk in order to ingest those logs, which is better, pros and cons, etc. And new to me, right? And obviously they're going to have to do their own cost analysis to find out what's going to cost less from an ingestion standpoint with Splunk's model, whatever that is. But I'm most concerned about helping them ensure they're getting all the telemetry they need from this critical solution that they rely upon. And so the pros and cons question came up.
So from a cost standpoint, just in my head, right? The cost is not the access of the API or the access of the add-on that Splunk, it's probably one of their community-free add-ons, hopefully, because they do have a pretty large community for that stuff.
It is.
I know sometimes
it is a free community add-on.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, because I know Splunk sometimes, if they create it, they want a little concession for it, right? And so if it's one of the community things, I know there's a bunch of, and there's actually a few of the Splunk community add-ons that have been developed by Microsoft folks, right?
Yes, totally. Yeah, because they're, regardless of the SIM competitive market, it's an important player, and we need to ensure that folks can ingest into it, right? If they're using our services. So it's fair that both companies work together on that aspect. So good call out.
Yeah. So it literally boils down to the size of the data that they're paying the egress, right? It doesn't matter if you're utilizing the API or you're creating that standard SIM connection. It boils down to the data that that leaves the service and goes into the Splunk databases, right?
Right. From a cost perspective, I get that. Yeah.
So I don't know the differences in size of each of those. My guess is that the API is probably going to provide access to more data so that you can throttle the data that you want and the data that you don't, right? You can filter that probably as part of that, hopefully as part of that add-on. That add-on may be kind of everything, just you kind of have to accept what that add-on delivers.
Right.
It is all API based though, right?
Right.
Whether you're creating that SIM connection or you're utilizing the API yourself, all of it's API anyway. It's just, I believe that the SIEM integration it's what we give you, right? Here's the data that we believe that you need, whereas probably the API, they're going to probably be able to get more than just that standard SIEM connection. But again, from a cost perspective, they're going to have to make that decision based on how much egress there is.
Right.
Okay,
From a
let,
cost
let me
perspective, I get that. You want to tackle cost there, Frank? I really want to understand also
no.
what's
So
being ingested, not just cost.
all right, I have not integrated the generic SIM for MCAS, but I just looked it up. I have done a fair amount of Graph API work, and from version 1.0 on forward, okay? And you also have to deal with Defender for Endpoint had its own API also, right?
Right. So did MDI. Yeah, that's right.
For what you're working with. So if depending upon the size of the implementation and how they're using the data, I would actually use the SIM integration. So, because the Graph API, you are going to have to program. So basically, the generic SIM integration is basically connecting to a syslog server. You're specifying the format, and it's just basically pumping the data out. Okay, and it has a format that is providing you to move forward. Then everything else on the other side is up to them, right?
Right.
Where the Graph API, you have to code against it. There's a lot of management side. You have to decide what's going to be given to you, not given to you. Are you really going to get everything you need in the raw data or not? So I would just tell them to go with the SIM integration and just pump the data out through a syslog and go from there, and not even worry about the Graph API.
Okay. Well, this your thoughts echo one architect who responded to me internally. He said the embedded functionality with the generic SIM integration is backed by the Microsoft engineering teams that support it, whereas the Graph API method, we have limited support capabilities for troubleshooting with the third-party product, which is another area I think was an important one to call out. So it sounds like you're kind of aligning on that thought process there, Frank.
Just from knowing syslog and knowing, visualizing how I think that they would actually make that work, it's just going to be much cleaner than dealing with the Graph API. If you're talking about a smaller amount of data that you are managing, let's say a case management on the other side or specific scenarios, then I might go with the Graph API after that for that.
Okay.
But
it's more if you use Graph API, it's going to be more customizable.
But it's customizable, but you're still limited to what data they've decided to send you through the Graph API. And so when you take a look at the reason why you had, I thought in the beginning, the different MDE capabilities is because the Graph API is trying to be generic. Hey, here's the alert, patch the alert, right? It's not like, hey, I need to actually perform an action on an endpoint, right? How is that going to be passed through the generic Graph API for security, right? And so that's why MDE had their own API. So I had a program against both of these, deciding how to handle those situations, right? And so, just do the generic SIM integration, let it go through the syslog server and be done with it.
Yeah, and they also want to, outside of just alerts and incidents, they're using Splunk as their full log audit capture scenario. So they want to capture everything they can across M365 services, even excluding security and compliance specific. So to your point, that's a lot more signals they want to pull in, right?
Yeah. And when, to get them to move over and say, listen, you're getting all this stuff over here. Now you get to deal with creating context around everything that you're getting. Take a look at the XDR, messaging and capability of M365 Defender. Everything's correlated.
Totally.
You have much more context. Even if you're pumping that data out, they can still use M365 Defender with the purpose-driven UI to manage what's going on inside the M365 environment. There's no reason why they can't do that and then use like the raw data that they're receiving over in Splunk to do their other correlations or what they're looking at. It just drives me crazy watching people try to manage incidents and alerts from M365 with inside a different product, because they're just losing so much context, right? And so that's what drives me crazy about that. And that's why I think it's important that there's that that hidden button within inside Sentinel where you press it and it jumps you over to M365 Defender. So then you can have that purpose-driven UI there.
Yeah, good call out. Good call out. So each of the, so just like, so hypothetically, just under the M365 Defender stack, go into each of those individual contexts, MDI, MDE, MDCA, which is in its own portal, and set up those direct SIM integration configurations.
Not all of them have it, I believe.
Okay.
Yep, you're right.
So you're going to have to go, you might actually have to send it out through Event Hub. A lot of them now can let you just send your data out through an Event Hub and then pump it into whatever way you want to go at that point in time.
Okay. All right. Thank you for breaking that down. Rod's checking it right now. I know MDE has it, and I know MDCA has it.
Yeah, I know MDE has it.
I don't think MDI has it.
No, I swear it did. I swear it did, because I was just looking in there the other day. Oh, and I want to have a news item for MDI before we close the pod today.
That's MDI was actually what I was trying to look for.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and you go down and look at it, and there was it. I thought it was in there. We're going to find out right here, right now. Identities. For everybody listening, we're just loading up the M365
Sorry, I'm not
Defender portal.
Sorry, this tenant, I don't have MDI, so.
Oh, okay. I've got it somewhere here. I can load it up quick on the side. Take a look. But yeah, we're just validating that. And then I'm not sure about MDO, honestly. I haven't worked with it in a little while, so I'm not sure if it has its own context or if that's an Event Hub opportunity, like you were just referring to.
But even so, you're looking at the at that point in time, you might have to go to the Graph API to get that stuff out.
Okay. Well, then that's kind of, yeah, then the problem is when you start saying things like that, customers like, well, then I'm going to have overlap and that's going to increase my cost. And it's like, well, yeah.
No, because you would actually just do the type. You would do the source. So you would actually just do the, going from the other side. So that's not too much of a big deal. You just want to stay away from managing a large volume of data through the Graph API.
Except it's Splunk, so they're used to dealing with large amounts of data.
It's not the Splunk side that I'm worried about.
Yeah, I know. I just, from a general perspective, those who have been historically working with on-prem tools, they just deal with lots of data anyway, right? And try to filter and sift through it. It's kind of
programming the Graph API to deal with a large amount of data is not fun, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, no doubt. That makes sense. Well, I'm in the MDI console right now, but it's on a different computer, so I can't share it. And there's a syslog notifications service that you can enable, but I guess that's not the same thing as piping a SIM, right? So yeah, okay.
So this would actually be a very good homework for you, since you loaded this up. Next week, go back and say, out of the 4 service or the 5 services, really, M365 Defender,
Right.
What are your options for each one? Event Hub, Graph API, or a SIM streaming directly from the product. And then, I don't know the answer to all of the different products, so that would be interesting to see.
Or you could save the all headaches and costs, and just use Sentinel.
Absolutely, yeah. And they are looking at that. It's just near-term coverage, but yeah, I hear you. Well, take advantage.
There's a number of customers that actually run Splunk and Sentinel side by side because of that cost situation, right? There's too much data, the complexity of trying to filter this stuff out and program it, develop something that's going to work. They'll just send it to Sentinel, and then Sentinel, you can send it to an Event Hub, the alerts, and send that to Splunk, and that's a lot less data.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I never thought about that option.
Have to look at what data they really need. I mean, that's just basic SIM stuff.
Well, in respect to that, if they're using the Microsoft products, you send them to Sentinel for free, let Sentinel do its thing, which it does really well, let it generate the alerts and the incidents, just send those to Splunk, then all they have to do in Splunk is use a centralized console to deal with what has been exposed.
Good call out. Thank you. Thank you for breaking that down.
Remember, one of the big things is the purpose-driven UI for this environment is key. And I think that how many days is the data retained in M365 Defender?
30 days, I believe, isn't it?
Oh, you can crank up MDE to 120, but the overall M365 Defender, I'm not sure. I'm gonna look that up.
I think it's 30 days, but I could be wrong.
It's another question. Yeah, so you can retain MDE data for up to 180 days. But yeah, I don't know what the standard is just for the XDR platform.
I think it was supposed to be, it could have been 14 days or 30 days. I forget what it was. My implementation was so old, it was only 7 days, and they could never, I guess that's what it was in the beginning. They could never fix it, so I had to dump that environment.
That's great.
All right, so what's up with Defender for Identity?
Rod, would you like to do the honors?
No, go ahead if you have it.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Yeah, I'll pull up the exact details, but effectively, while I pull that up on my other screen here, MDI now has response capabilities built in to the portal. This is big. Instead of just detection and then having to go and manage on-prem AD accounts manually through ADUC, whatever you want to do, you can actually now take action against particular accounts that may be, experiencing risky behavior through the console. And it's important to call out that, because I'm working on an MDI implementation with a customer right now, while you set up a Surface account, hopefully a GMSA account for the read and discovery aspects for MDI generally, you now need to set up a separate read, write, or actionable account that can actually set password change restrictions, disable accounts, etc., separately from the other account. So there's segregation there. So good to have the actionable capabilities built into MDI, but understanding that your standard configuration is not going to be effective for that because it intentionally didn't grant the overarching Surface account those capabilities. It was just meant to be an observer. Now you need to actually fire up another Surface account, GMSA account, in order to make those actions occur.
Most important question: does it use the Power Platform to do this?
It's sure you can do anything. You're a Power Platform expert. You can tell us. Yeah.
The ironic thing about this announcement this week about the MDI stuff was that, Brody, you weren't here last week, but when we had Joe and Chris on talking about our topic last week, there was that question: when are we going to be able to do actionable things, right, with MDI? And then 2 days later, we announced something. I mean, it's limited, right? But yeah, as part of that limitation, or at least those new features, the investment is there to do more.
They listened to our podcast and got busy, so that's what it comes.
Exactly. Yeah, we were the drivers of change there. That's amazing that we did that. Great job, everybody. Pat yourselves on the back. So yeah, that was nice news. And then Rod, I want to take your thunder when you found that workbook, but you beat me to it sharing the Defender for Endpoint MITRE results, which was an interesting development that came out recently. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, and we've talked, I was trying to think where I had this discussion. It was with a customer or someone in the field a couple weeks back. I think it was over an email thread. They were asking about what, from a Defender perspective, what's our approach to MITRE? Do we have any documentation on anything that we can supply? Because we just released this little MITRE capability, this MITRE area within Microsoft Sentinel in the past few weeks. People absolutely love it. And they're like, well, why can't we have this for Defender? Well, we've always, most of what we do from a threat intel perspective and our coverage for those things has always been based on the MITRE attack framework, right? We don't just come up with, some idea on the weekend. Well, let's figure out how we're going to cover this, right? There's this new threat. No, we pretty much follow the industry standards like everyone else. Some of the industry best practices, and MITRE is a big part of that. So we kind of announced this week as well, and laid that out. And it was funny because I just talked about that, and that email thread I was on, as soon as that was announced, like the next day, I grabbed that link and I tossed it to that person. They're like, "Oh, thanks." There's our documentation. Yeah. That's actually pretty good. Everybody loves MITRE. Everybody loves MITRE tech frameworks. It started out as a really great idea, and it's really exploded into something really fantastic with all the sub techniques and tactics and stuff like that as well.
MITRE is trying to make up for Styx Taxi, if you know that.
Yeah.
You know those things.
Yeah.
I don't know those things.
You don't know those things?
You can look that up, Brody, and
More homework. Great.
More homework.
have fun with that.
I
I'm
need to
actually
look up
interested in the chart that you provide next week for what's available for each service.
It's gonna be the best chart you've ever seen. I'm gonna build it in Power Platform.
Do it like Gene. Make the animations like Gene.
Jing,
I'll be
Jing.
including it. I'll be including it in SC200. Actually, you're doing my homework now.
Oh,
so.
great! This is great. You're subcontracting. Smart of you, Frank. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, Rod, I'd like to just one of these episodes just show Jing's Sentinel deck. It's amazing, right? Like,
yeah, I talked to him about that. Was it last week or something?
I think he's supposed to be on the show, isn't he? Scheduled for a reactor show. So
sometime in May, I think. Right? Yeah.
Perfect.
He makes me so jealous. He's like, oh my goodness, the way that he's the best at PowerPoint. We were on a briefing call with a partner, him and I, last week, and he whipped out those PowerPoint presentations of his. And there was this lady, the customer, she's like, oh, man, I'm so jealous. That is so, oh my, it just like sold the customer. Just that PowerPoint presentation. He could have just like let it do its own animation, not said a thing.
Yeah.
And it would have been just fine. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I had a similar, Jing, it's amazing. And I can't wait for him to show that off. And I'm totally going to use it and look smart in front of customers. Thanks, Jing. And also, Mark Simos and the team, CMOS and the cybersecurity reference architecture, we used a couple of those build out slides for our on-site customer visit, where it builds out from your traditional on-prem and out to all the cloud services, management, security, et cetera. And when you get something that builds out and steps customers through the whole thing, and it's very visual, and they're engaged, and you see them just like hanging on, it sounds like that individual Rod that you were referring to was just loving it. Like that's massive value, like helping them understand those concepts.
Yeah. Yep. Everyone has different learning style and different learning capabilities, and we just have to figure out what is best, right? So.
Include everything, right? Like it's just like the learn material, videos, interactive guides, and reading. That combination helps instead of just one or the other.
I agree.
All right.
Good times.
So who do we have for next week?
I can look real quick. You guys can, talk amongst yourselves, and I'll look it up. Of course, that means I have to open Teams, which I absolutely love.
I'm gonna race you. Let's see if I can get it before you.
You'll probably beat me.
Well, I'm having hardware issues with my device, so I never know.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm glad it's happening to you.
Hopefully, a new one's coming. Okay, so next week is
13th. Michael Howard.
God, right there.
Yeah. Oh, Ed has it listed in here as we're going to talk about Sec DevOps, but it's actually DevSecOps. So
Brody loses again.
Come on. It should just be DevOps, and security should just be baked in. Why have to call it out? Just throwing it out.
I had this discussion with my team, so I'll have a lot of input on this. I had this discussion with my team this past week. All right. This is just another one of the. Remember the whole DevOps, and everybody's like, I don't understand what that is. Oh my goodness. It's literally just trying to combine all development and operations. Trying to combine two entities that have headbutted since the beginning of age, right? The technology age. It doesn't. Well, I won't say it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. There's processes around it that makes it work better and more streamlined. So now they're trying to pull in the DevSecOps, pull in the security operations and development folks to kind of unify these teams, not into a single team, but take these different areas and make them work much better together. And when you think about it, this one actually makes sense because Sec is in the middle, right? Security. It should be the thread that ties all this stuff together. Otherwise, developers are going to have administrator accounts on production machines like they've always wanted, and the operations people are trying to, hammer them down. Yeah, they're trying to you can have administrative. So now security comes in and says, well, people,
let's strike a balance.
Yeah, let's strike a balance. Let you do your job, but you're not going to run rampant within our organization. So
great.
We'll see what works out.
Good topic. Yeah, I haven't met Michael yet. I've seen him on some internal calls, but that'll be an awesome guest. And then after that, the legendary Matt Sozman on our first Reactor show. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Very first Microsoft Reactor live show. Yeah, that's going to be super awesome. And Matt, I think he's all excited and geared up for it too. So
perfect. He's excited. It's going to be a good time. So that's fantastic.
Yep.
Great.
All right, gentlemen, great show. We look forward to having Edward back next week. Until then.
Take care, everyone. Oh, by the way, Frank, we need to get like an ending audio thing for our podcast.